Hello, everybody. We're just going to allow it to take a few moments to get everybody into the room. But welcome everybody. We've got lots of people joining us today from all over the world. I'm just going to check that everybody is in before we begin. Just give it a couple of minutes for everyone to arrive. And then we'll start because we have a packed agenda today. Okay, I think everybody is in the room now. So good afternoon and welcome to this UN Food Systems Summit Independent Dialogue convened by UN Food Systems Champion Philip Lymbery of Compassion in World Farming on scaling agroecological and regenerative agriculture for human, for animal and for planetary health. We have contributors from all over the world joining us today. So for some of you, I think it's good morning. For some of you, it's good evening. And for a couple of you, welcome faces that I see. I suspect it's the middle of the night for those of you joining us from Australia, but thank you so much for joining us today. So I'm Jenny Andersson of the Really Regenerative Centre. We're a community interest company in the UK with a deep interest in regenerative economies and in particular food production where possible. And I'm your curator and I'm your host today. It's now some 6 weeks since the UN Food Systems People Summit in September, where many nations came together and spoke about their commitments to a new and different global food system. I'd like to think that by now, the UN Food Systems Summit process has brought to the world's attention the pivotal role that the food system plays in a number of converging global crises. So climate change, biodiversity loss, soil health, water systems, as well as its impact on social cohesion and culture. And whilst agroecological and regenerative farming methods have received some attention in the process, there's still much more that we can explore, that we can understand, and that we can action to scale these approaches to food production so that they become a key contributory pillar to a future sustainable and equitable global food system. And that's what we'll be exploring together today. So today's dialogue is about 2.5 hours long. We aim to complete by 4:30 UK time. And there are 4 stages to the dialogue, which we've convened according to the recommendations made by the UN Food Systems Summit. So there's this rapid introduction, and then a quick fire series of presentations from different perspectives on agroecology and regenerative agriculture. We'll then go into breakout groups where we'll discuss key questions together in small groups of about 8 to 12 people, and a collective feedback session at the end on the outcomes of those breakout discussions. The open plenary sessions will be recorded, but the breakout discussion groups won't be, to encourage frank and open conversation between you. So shortly, we'll be hearing from 9 different speakers who'll present their key insights into how they feel this vital field of food production and farming could be scaled. We have 2 groups of speakers today. At the end of the first group, first 4 speakers, I'll have an opportunity to put your questions to the panelists. And again, after the second group of 5 speakers. So please do put any questions, as tough as you like, that you would like to pose in the chat box, and they'll be passed to me. We may not be able to address all the questions today, but we'll certainly try to address as many as we can. So after these quickfire presentations, we'll move into breakout groups, and I'll share more about the questions with you after our speaker sessions. But first, we have some really quick questions for you, which we can explore together in real time on the Slido app. So on the screen, you can probably still see the code that you need to scan. If you haven't ever used Slido before, it's really very simple. And the code #CIWF will take you into the app for the live questions that we're about to share. Okay, so if everyone is ready, and we'll see your responses come up live on the screen. here's the first question to get us started. So what does regenerative agriculture mean to you? What comes to mind when you hear the term regenerative agriculture? Let's see what you've got to say. Oh yeah, giving back more than we take, definitely. Somebody is very fast at typing there. To rejuvenate, the future of farming, absolutely, I definitely agree with that one. What else have we got coming in? Sustainability, yeah, I think sustainability plus. Restoring the balance of nature while still producing sustainable nutritional food, definitely. Eco-agriculture, soil regeneration, symbiotic with nature, I like that one, that's great. Healthy soil, very best practice of organic agriculture, that's interesting. Low inputs, very, very true. Survival, I think that's really important. I definitely agree with that one. Observation, nature positive, a healing process. Yeah, I definitely think we're in a time where healing our relationship with nature is important for people, for the planet. Producing food regeneratively. Ooh, adhering to 6 principles, and the key one being context. Interesting. I hope we'll have a chance to explore that later on. The future in capitals. Absolutely. Okay, super. What a great start. Let's go to our, oh no, we've still got some more coming in. Joined up landscape. Interesting. Engaging with evolved, sustainable natural ecosystem. I can see that we've got some very knowledgeable people in our group today. Diverse supply chains, definitely, that's true. Okay, excellent. So we must try to keep to time. So let's go to our second question for you, which is a little bit more complicated, but it's a choice for you. So what are the main barriers to scaling agroecology and regenerative agriculture? Is it the lack of agreed definitions of agroecology and regenerative agriculture? Is it lack of knowledge amongst farmers about how to transition to those systems? Is it lack of finance that's available for that transition? Is it lack of knowledge about how to do it? Or is it lack of interdisciplinary research and science-based evidence? I can see a trend is emerging as we can see answers coming in. So Nicoletta Bettini of the IMF is definitely going to have her work cut out in her presentation that's coming up soon, because it seems to me that a lack of finance and investment for farmers is really top of your list today here. And also lack of knowledge about how to transition to those systems. And from Esther, I can see in the chat box a lack of systems thinking. Thanks for that contribution, Esther, that's really important. We didn't have room on the screen for absolutely everything, and we know this is a really complex field. Super. Okay, everybody, thanks very much for your input there. I think we've made an exciting start here. We can already see some issues that are emerging as priorities, particularly that investment level and upscaling knowledge. Okay, but first, it's before we go any further, it's now time to welcome our speakers, our guest speakers, each of whom is going to give us a quick 5-minute summary of the key opportunities and challenges they see. I think you've all received blogs of our speakers today, so I'm just going to introduce them by name, organisation, and title, so that we keep to time. And I'm delighted to welcome first the convener of this dialogue, Mr. Philip Lymbery, who's the Global Chief Executive of Compassion in World Farming. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you very much, Jenny, and welcome to you all. Great to see so many friends, old and new, and for this really timely and live wire debate. And I really enjoyed the Slido contributions already, seeing regenerative agroecological farming as a healing process in our relationship with nature, and the time has never been more urgent. I live on a small family hamlet, a small farm hamlet, which provides a fascinating lens to observe the state of the countryside. Here in southern England, my neighbours include a herd of cows that graze the rich pastures of the river valley in which we live, and they graze in harmony with nature and kept in accordance to high animal welfare. Further afield, as I walk the fields and the woods, sometimes I see a different picture, both in England and globally. I see the effects of industrial agriculture, where animals are removed from the countryside to be caged, crammed or confined in factory farms, and where crops are grown in monocultures with heavy doses of chemical pesticides and fertilizers. Where this happens, it becomes something which you just have to notice how intensive farmlands are devoid of life. That once common farmland birds have become, well, uncommon. Familiar creatures like hedgehogs have become unfamiliar. Fields that were once wriggling with worms have become wormless, and soils that should be out in the fields are now being washed away into rivers and roads. Whichever lens you use to look at the countryside, for me, one thing has become clear, that food has become a central issue to saving the planet. Just take a look at some of the headline statistics. Food systems generate 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions, and they're responsible for up to 80% of biodiversity loss, particularly due to the impact of factory farming. Industrial agriculture is a major driver of deforestation and soil degradation, as well as being the biggest cause of animal cruelty on the planet. A month ago, world leaders gathered for the United Nations Food Systems Summit. Its stated aim was to focus on transforming food systems to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, by 2030. The man behind the summit, the UN's Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, framed the problem by saying, "We are waging a war against nature and reaping the bitter harvest, ruined crops, dwindling incomes, and failing food systems." He concluded by saying, the war on the planet must end, and food systems can help us build that peace. Hear, hear, Secretary General, hear, hear. The summit itself was a success in changing the narrative away from an approach that I would characterize as being business as usual with tweaks, toward one that speaks to the need for transformational reform of food systems. Transformational. Government statements at the summit, though, they matched the new language of transformation, but largely fell short in matching it with the kind of bold, ambitious actions that are going to be needed. One of those big, bold actions, perhaps the most important, is moving away from industrial animal agriculture. Without doing so, we will fail to meet most SDGs and therefore fail woefully in creating a sustainable future. Turning things around depends on how quickly we move to nature positive and welfare friendly regenerative farming, to restoring that relationship with nature, that healing process that was spoke about at the beginning. And we're going to need that to tackle the climate crisis, the collapse of nature, and the health emergencies that are now facing us all. The question is, how do we do it? And I think at this event, we've amassed a fantastic array of speakers who have got brilliant ideas and are putting them into practice. For me, At least part of the answer lies in getting everyone involved, from producers to consumers to governments, corporates, financial bodies, and the UN agencies themselves, all involved in truly transforming food systems toward a nature and welfare friendly production based on regenerative farming. The answer to me lies not least in governments using policies for change to drive this new direction, directives, incentives, subsidies to steer toward health-oriented regenerative food and farming. Globally, governments at the moment provide $700 billion a year in farm subsidies. That's more than $1 million a minute, most of which currently drives the climate crisis, wildlife destruction and ill health. Why not redirect that money to something which restores and heals that relationship with nature toward regenerative farming? The answer also lies in part in food companies setting measurable targets for shifting their supply chains toward regenerative production. It lies in the financial sector, ensuring that agricultural funding only supports the transition toward regenerative farming. And it lies in UN agencies taking their cue from the UN Food Systems Summit by creating a new global agreement on food and farming, one that charts an urgent course away from industrial animal agriculture toward nature-friendly, regenerative agroecological farming that can truly build back better, be that climate, biodiversity, soils, healthier food, or animal welfare. In this way, we can restore the countryside to a living, breathing world for the sake of human, animal, and planetary health. We can create a world that can sustain us all, now and for generations to come. Now is the moment to act. What we do now will affect the next 1,000 years. Jenny, back to you.
Phillips, thank you very much. I think you've really set the scene for us for our deliberations ahead. $1 million a minute, just think what we could in fact do with that. I'd like to invite our second speaker now, who is Nicoletta Bettini, the senior economist at the International Monetary Fund. Nicoletta, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny, and thanks so much to all. This is a great arena for discussing a very hot topic, and I'm glad to be here. I wanted to share a few slides with you. Let me see if I can do that easily or not. Share screen. So here. See, tell me if you see this. Can you see it at all?
Yep.
You can. Okay, good. So I just want to say a few things. As you know, like Philip, most people here on the call have been working on these topics for a few years now. And my particular take and interest is not just the the science of it, but also the economic policy angle, being at the IMF. And so I focus really squarely on that, trying to figure out ways to lead to a transformation, the transformation that Philip was alluding to, that we desperately need for various reasons. And so the key issues that I see here are four, I would say. The first, and Philip did talk about this, there's a false dichotomy in the narrative that energy is the main enemy and for climate change and other things, and therefore we need to focus all our energy on energy. But the truth is that agriculture, fish, and forestry play a tremendously important role in currently in the destruction of the planet and in accelerating our a race towards implosion. Therefore, we need to be very careful not to put agriculture in a corner, but rather actually, I would say, prioritize, as I discuss in some of my work for various reasons. I don't want to go into the science of this, and Philip already talked about this, but I just wanted to show this chart, which a lot of people based this conclusion that we should focus on energy on this, the left chart shown here, which is a pie chart. And the left chart shows that energy is about 3/4 of emissions, and agriculture is about 18%, and then the rest is an 8% going to waste and industry. And this definition of sectors is a definition used by the IPCC, and it's not an economic definition. In economics, we use a different method for categorizing sectors. And agriculture in that classification, which is an economic one, takes a much bigger role, especially when you link it to other parts of economic sectors. So the chart to the right here shows very recent analysis by Kripa, for example. These are papers that came out in Science, and we show that when you look at the food system as a whole, we're approaching more something like 30%, 34%. The IPCC puts the food system in its 2019 report at 37% of emissions. In addition to that, of course, you have all the destruction of the ecosystem by diversity that Philip was talking about. The second, so that dichotomy still has to be completely clear. The food system did a good job at raising attention, but I think there's still a lot of resistance in some quarters in making this a priority. And this is a political fight that we have to engage in. The second is that it's really economic policy that plays a huge role here in redressing the system. There's a lot of business and finance issues, but they're related. And I just wanted to show you a chart because I'm working on the US now. I accompanied the US team on the US mission this year, 2021, with the Biden administration. And I just prepared a few charts for them, just showing that, how subsidies in agriculture go primarily, to grains and meat. And these grains are primarily, if you look at the middle pie chart here, going to animal feed. So it is a circular way of, putting public money into propelling, the wrong way of doing things. And the outcome of that you see on the very right chart here with all these little lines. And these basically produced by the USDA, and it shows the prices of food produced by, the subsidy system. And it shows to you, of course, that, grain and meat are inexpensive, and then fruit and vegetables, the red and green lines, are expensive. And that's what drives diets, and that closes the equilibrium for the system. So we need to work on subsidies, taxes. These are very important matters, and I discuss in my book, The Economics of Sustainable Food. But of course, as Philip also mentioned, there's a big role for finance. And people have started looking at this. I wrote a paper on this. I think finance in agriculture is going to do the wrong things, become very speculative to buy farmland. And there's a lot of large-scale purchases of land in countries that are, where there's no land tenure is very weak. And that meant that, the index here shown, this is a Seville index of farmland, has gone skyrocketing. If you buy land, you're going to be a rich person. And that's not what we need when we're trying to bring people on the land to do regenerative agriculture. So it's actually beat, gold by a factor of so many over the past year. So don't rush to your broker now to buy land. But there's also this last point, which was raised by Jenny, which is the definitional in the survey, the definitional issues and the science of it. It's quite foggy. And, you see countries now saying, oh, we're going to do regenerative agriculture, and they're going to do something which is maybe planting a row of daisies, between crops. And that's not quite it. It's a much more complicated and drastic change that we need to bring about. So I just wanted to, flag these 4 points here because I want to have a discussion. I think these are all very important. and they kind of reinforce each other. If we can make, you know, a dent in any of this, in a way or another, that will be very helpful for making progress. Sorry for my dog, is she's barking as usual. Let me stop here and thank you.
Nicoletta, thank you very much. For those of you in the chat that couldn't quite see the screen, Nicoletta, perhaps we can get a copy of some of those slides from you later to share those diagrams. But I think you've, you know, made many important points there, particularly the issue of land ownership and how complex the approach is to this transition, and that there's no real blueprint for us to follow. Our next speaker is Jeff Moyer, who is the CEO of Rodale Institute, who's going to share his thoughts and his experience with us. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you to my fellow panelists and all those in attendance. It's my distinct pleasure to visit with you from my office at the world headquarters of Rodale Institute, located in eastern Pennsylvania in the USA. Let me start by saying at Rodale Institute, we clearly understand that problems are easy to identify. We identified some of them already this morning in our earlier presentations. Solutions are key to our future, and they are much more difficult to identify. For too long, we as a society across the globe have reached for a button called the easy button. We have asked for easy, fast, and cheap when it comes to our food and fiber production. And in return, we have gotten pollution, contamination, and externalized costs. Those of us that are gathered here today are now asking for the creation of a new button. We call it here at Rodale Institute the Regenerative Organic Agriculture button. There are several key drivers at Rodale Institute that we look at to help initiate change. First, we look at research. Our research is not research that gets put on a shelf. It is research designed very specifically to be a catalyst for change. We need to use our science to push the healing process as we focus our energy on soil health. The change that we're talking about here today does not happen without science. And while we are all gathered here today, for the most part, of like mind and spirit, I can assure you there are other meetings taking place in similar situations where the focus is on sustaining the status quo. And they too use science to move their agenda forward. The second point, after science, we want to look at taking a bottom-up approach to driving change. In this case, we're looking at using the supply chain. We cannot exclude food companies, food retailers, distributors, and food commodity logistics companies if we hope to have scale. We also need to look at consumers and customers across the globe, as we know that they are changing their value system that they bring to the marketplace. We then look at these pieces in concert as a leverage point to drive policy. Policy is what's used to incentivize change at the farm level. Farmers around the world do what the policies and the marketplace tell them to do. Up until now, we've told farmers we want easy, fast, and cheap. And now we're proposing to tell them something different. Then we need to set high bar standards to give definitions to terms like regenerative agriculture, organic, or in our case, regenerative organic, to better involve that marketplace that focuses on organic, our definition of regenerative organic agriculture focuses on the word organic, soil health, animal welfare, and social justice. We then use that science and education to inform consultants and other industries to form partnerships to support farmers, including folks like other academic institutions, the banking industry, insurance industries, and others that are associated with much of the agricultural production around the world. And finally, we need to embrace advanced technologies to better scale the adoption of regenerative and regenerative organic agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is not backward facing. We are not suggesting that we return to the good old days, whatever they may be or however you define them, as we look at tools and mechanisms to better improve the ecology of the regions in which we farm. We need to be forward facing, hosting a vision that includes robotics, drone supported technologies, artificial intelligence sciences, all used in concert to advance and the scale of adoption. And then finally, we need everyone pulling together for unified change, no matter what your skill set, whether it's journalism, the banking industry, science, policy, marketing, communications, videography, and yes, most importantly, farmers, ranchers, and producers, if we are to focus on soil health to heal people and the planet. Thank you.
Jeff, thank you very much for that contribution. I think what you're bringing to mind here is something that's enormously important, which is the interconnected complexity of this challenge that we face, and particularly of interest, our approach to technology, a modern approach. And I know we're going to discuss that in the breakout groups. And now I'd like to invite our last, but definitely not least, in this section, speaker, Siham Dressi, who's the Program Management Officer in the Terrestrial Ecosystems Unit in the Ecosystems Division at UNEP headquarters in Nairobi, who's kindly stepped in for Doreen Robinson, who has been called away. Siham, thank you so much for joining us at short notice. The floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be part of this panel and of this discussion. So very much in line with my colleagues before me, for UNEP, unsustainable agriculture and food production run right through the center of our triple planetary crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. Agriculture is identified as a threat to 85% species at risk of extinction. It is also responsible, as Philip mentioned, for the reforestation. 69% of all the planet's water used for unsustainable agriculture, 34% of all land. Unsustainable agriculture is also responsible for approximately 1/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions. Lastly, 1/3 of all food produced is never eaten or goes to waste, while more than 700 million people go hungry every day, all while nearly 2 billion are overweight or obese. It just means the way we farm, consume, and dispose of food affects not only the health of our planet, but also our own health. Food systems impacts on biodiversity have never been more relevant than today in the current pandemic the world is facing. Biodiversity loss doesn't just mean we're losing the hero species we love, it means we're fundamentally reducing the resilience of our ecosystems, and in doing so, cutting off the vital stream of life supporting services they provide. We are reducing our own resilience. We lose essential pollinators, we lose the quality of our soils, we destroy genetic diversity of plants and animals that have evolved for millennia, and we erode the functioning of systems that filter our air and water and regulate our climate. Also, our resilience and ability to cope with diseases is inextricably linked to the health of our agriculture and food system. We are increasing our risks for zoonotic diseases like COVID-19. Very important, addressing inequality and power imbalances at household, community, national, and global levels is at the heart of the agriculture and food system transformation needed to reduce poverty, improve health, and achieve sustainable, equitable livelihoods. About 80% of the world's extreme poor reside in rural areas, and most rely, at least in part, on natural resource-based livelihoods for their economic well-being and food security and nutrition. We need a laser-sharp focus on inequality that allows us to support the most vulnerable people. This includes ending discriminatory practices and norms that limit equitable livelihoods, particularly for the most marginalized women, youth, and indigenous peoples and local communities. This also includes particular attention to land tenure and land rights, as mentioned before by Nicoletta. It means also confronting social norms and practices that systematically privilege some groups over others, depending on their gender, age, and cultural orientation. It means also confronting structural barriers within institutions and policies to achieve lasting change so that agriculture and food systems can lead to equitable, sustainable livelihoods rather than just offering temporary or seasonal opportunities. This demands adjustments to regimes that regulate access to, use of, and control over resources, especially those defining land distribution, labor division, and decision-making power. And this also means increased access to socio-technological innovations, such as agroecology, that can improve sustainability, access, and efficiency. In this way, we can nourish more people, live within planetary boundaries, and protect and restore ecosystems and landscapes. Agroecological approaches are increasingly seen as being able to make a key contribution to mainstreaming biodiversity in agriculture, transitioning to sustainable and resilient agricultural and food systems, and building back better and greener. As we know, many of us, agroecology is a scientific field, a practice, and a solution-based social movement all in one. It represents a crucial interdisciplinary redesign of agricultural production as part of a social process with economic, sociological, food, and environmental dimensions. Agroecology is seen from UNEP as a nature-positive food systems in a nutshell, transforming food systems to address the urgent need for equitable food and nutrition security while regenerating and restoring rather than further damaging the environment. It promotes collaborative action and multi-sectoral problem solving through co-creation processes that integrate scientific and local knowledge and practices. It promotes responsible and transparent governance at farm, ecosystem, and landscape levels. UNEP recognizes that the application of these principles globally, supporting local innovation and traditional knowledge, has the potential to make a major contribution to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in a holistic, integrated way. Among several initiatives where UNEP is actively involved, I would like to highlight the following ones. First of all, the Coalition on Agroecology and Regenerative Agriculture that was formed during the UN Food System Summit process. As you know, this coalition, as you may know, this coalition aims at putting forward agroecological and regenerative agriculture approaches as a key lever to transform food systems. Also, UNEP is part of the advisory group of the Transformative Partnership Platform for Agroecology. Its objective is to address critical knowledge and implementation gaps about agroecological transitions, bringing together research and development, science and social movements, and local and scientific knowledge through transdisciplinary science and the co-creation of knowledge. Through our work in the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, this UN Decade is led by UNEP and FAO, focus is put on protecting and restoring ecosystem services to secure multiple benefits of sustainable development. In particular, agroecology is an essential regenerative approach for productive landscapes that are degraded. Finally, the UN Environment Assembly is an important place to advance these kind of conversations and ensure that the environment community is fully on board. As part of the preparations for the resumed 5th session of the UN Environment Assembly to be held in Nairobi on the 28th of February until the 2nd of March 2022, UNEP has launched a call for proposals of the side events in the margin of the resumed session. UNEP side event applications should focus on the overall theme of the 5th session, which is strengthening actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, or on the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations Environment Programme, which is the 5th of the special session. This forthcoming Environment Assembly can provide a unique opportunity to call for action from an environment perspective instead of only from an agricultural point of view, supporting at the interface of ecology and agronomy, integrated farming systems, climate sensitive, agroecological, and other innovative approaches. So please do not hesitate to contact me if you have any question. And if you would like, to receive, more information regarding your potential participation in this UN Assembly. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. We have quite a few questions coming in from people for the panel today. So Nicoletta, I'm going to send this one first to you here. Do economists know why the overall impact of directed farm support has been to reduce the underlying profitability of the farming process itself? It's a big question.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself. Yeah, I'd send a private answer to Bill. I think the question is not to reduce profitability for all. The question is to concentrate profits in the hands of a few. So of course, a lot of people, since at least 100 years or more have, left the sector because of a number of policies. Initially, the war to run away from the horrors of the war and the food insecurity policy, pour money into farmers' pocket to make them more productive and mechanized. But eventually these kind of took hold into the wrong direction, and the mechanization and the concentration arrived at levels that basically implied that either you got big or you got out. And this mantra meant that, a lot of people lost profit, they lost their job as farmers, people operating in this field. But there are a few that make a lot of money. And of course, those are now the ones that, I wouldn't say they write the laws for themselves, but almost, they have, there's this now circularity between the politics of agriculture policies and these big businesses, and they now transnational. So, they kind of reach out to the globe in production, affecting, of course, also developing countries in multiple ways. And all of these ways are not good often, so.
Thank you, Nicoletta. I'm conscious that we are running slightly behind time, so thank you for that response. And I encourage the speakers to respond in the chat box if you have time. We have another question here, which I think Philip and Jeff, you might like to comment on. Do you think sufficient value is placed on food, and how might we move to true costs? How might that be an important part of this transformation? Philip or Jeff, would you like to share your thoughts on that?
I'm happy to give a very quick a response to allow Jeff to expand, but I see true cost accounting as hugely important to make sure that we value food and properly value what goes into making the food. So I do see true cost accounting as a really important mechanism to move away from the current system, where essentially the external costs on the environment, the climate, human health are externalized. So we all pay for those. So you pay for cheap food 3 times, once at the checkout, the second time through our tax subsidies, and the third through the cleanup cost to our health and the environment.
Yeah, in the essence of time, I'll try to keep it short. I agree with Philip 100%. We pay for food multiple times when we purchase it, and it's time to reinvent that and not say that food that is produced in a regenerative fashion has a premium price, rather that conventional food has a discounted price that we pay for in other places. And let's get the true cost of food on the table so people can decide which farming systems we want to support as people who purchase or consume the food through multiple channels. I agree, Philip. Well said.
Thank you. You too,
Thank
Jeff.
Both. So I'd like to call to a close this first part of our session and thank Philip, Jeff, Nicoletta and Siham. I'm sorry we don't have time for more questions, but let's see what we come back with later on in the session if we have some more time. So thanks to our first 4 panelists, and it's time for our second group now. I'd like to first welcome JiaBin Huang, who is the Global Farming Expertise Manager at Danone. JiaBin, would you like to take the floor?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jenny and everybody for the invitation. Very happy to be here, and can only imagine listening to the first speakers, what an engaging discussion we will have at the end. But indeed, if I look at Danone, the company that I work for, our place in the value chain is exactly where we just left the discussion, to be honest. Because as a company, Danone is really, our mission is to bring health through food to as many people as possible. But we want that in a way that is, as we used to say, sustainable for the agriculture, but also for us as a business. Because in the end of the day, if we look at our divisions where we bring this health, is either through water with good hydration, but also in the different parts of life with early life nutrition. And as we see over years that many of our consumers, which are actually our the ones that make sure that we stay in business, are the ones that indeed make the choice on the shelf. And having said that, we see clearly that there's more need for diverse products, not only in the way they taste with different ingredients, but also on the way it is produced. And for us as a company, it's very important to listen to consumers. Because what we've seen as well is we can bring products to market which have the best footprint of ever, but if nobody turns to buy it, well, we don't change anything and we might run out of business, right? So we have to listen to consumers. And over the past time, and of course, COVID has brought a really, let's say, distinction in this, but we clearly see that there is a change. And now more consumers want products that have either a, let's say, net impact on the environment, or, and that's a growing group as well, we see that consumers are asking and purchasing products that have a positive impact on the way it is produced and the impact on the planet. For us as a company, really agriculture is super important. If you look at the material cost for us as a business, it's massive. But also if we look at global impact, we have products that we purchase from agriculture that is reaching out, are impacting over 400,000 farms worldwide. And if you think about the families and the people that work there, the number is doubling, if not tripling, right? So we impact a lot of people. And having said our business as well, the footprint on carbon and water is massively when it comes to agriculture. So agriculture for us as a business is important. That's also the reason why we have chosen to work with the strategy on improving regenerative agriculture. And I always try to make it simple in a way of telling the people who are interested by saying regenerative agriculture means to keep what is good. Let's not, it's not all about change. Keep what is good, but so many things go right already in agriculture. There's great examples out there. But there are things to improve, and let's see what we can do there, and really to restore anything that's there. And for us, that means we need to engage farmers, and we do it in 3 ways. First, of course, we need to know where are we today, really to have a baseline study and with clear tools on the ground to see what's happening. The second one is that, and as already mentioned earlier, through cost accounting, we've got a system in place already for a few years in the US and in Europe where we value the milk that we purchase to the true cost of production to that farmer. So you share the risk with, as Danone as a company, with the farmer supplier. And in the end, my third point here is really to share best practices, because there are so many great examples everywhere, and farmers can learn so much about each other. There's a great deal there. And we haven't made an alliance a couple of years ago with some other global suppliers. It's called Farming for Generations. And within this program, really, we can share best practices around the world to make farmers aware about the good that they can do. And really that will help both them as farmers, us as business, but in the end of the day, bring these kind of solid products to market for the consumers.
Zishan, thank you so much for that contribution and for being so succinct and quick there, and highlighting for us the importance of creating consumer demand, how we engage farmers, the fact that it's important to share the risk and how much they can learn from each other. I'd like to introduce now somebody who is right at the thick of it in Tanzania, one of the key countries in Africa that's got multiple agroforestry and regenerative agriculture projects, and where it's built into government policy. So let's welcome Janet Maro of Sustainable Agriculture Tanzania.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Good to see you again, and thank you so much for this opportunity to get to share today. My name is Janet Maro. I work with Sustainable Agriculture Tanzania. And as an organization, we have been working with regenerative agriculture for the last a little over 10 years. And we have a network of over 20,000 farmers here in Tanzania. So I've been following the previous speakers, and thank you so much for touching in on the global sphere and global issues. But I will talk a bit on the ground and particular experiences here in Tanzania with practices that farmers are using to really regenerate the land, like using compost, using green manure and cover crops, using intercropping and companion planting in the farms, and plants helping each other to do biological nitrogen fixation, helping each other to repel pests and also keep away diseases. And in this way, really the system is nourishing itself and regenerating itself. We also work a lot on research, whereby we carry out demand-driven participatory research, which keeps farmers at the center. And it's the farmers' needs or the farmers' problems that are used to carry out, to come up with research topics. But then the research is done together with farmers, and farmers are part of the process of finding solutions together with researchers. So in this way, really the research addresses, so as an organization, we have successfully been able to work across the value chain. And here, I mean, from production to the table, from the farm to the table to the fork. And in this way, we ensure that what is consumed is really healthy, nutritious, free, and fairly grown food in systems which are nourishing the soil and protecting the environment, and without having harm for the producers. So it's all really safe, healthy, and the product is nutritious, and the producers have a better welfare due to assured markets and assured places where the consumers, who are also knowledgeable and aware about the need to consume healthy food, not just for their bodies, but because they're contributing towards a fair world, but also contributing and supporting farmers who are conserving the environment and doing something positive for the environment, which we all should be doing. So apart from the organization where we do most of the training work, we also have the social business, which does the business or the trade with the farmers' products. And then we have been able to successfully work together as a movement in Tanzania. And we have in our agriculture policy already a statement in recognition of ecological organic agriculture. And currently we are working on the National Ecological Organic Agriculture Strategy for the country. This is a big milestone, and Tanzania is one of the countries that can be used really as an experience with such innovative and trendy. I call it trendy because really governments that are supporting a free, fair, ecological way of food production are really trendy, because this is what we need in this time where we have issues of climatic change. And we know the UN climate change conference is coming up soon in a few weeks in Glasgow. And really the message, we all need food, everybody needs food, but we have to be conscious of what food do we eat. And so food that comes from regenerative sources, from sustainable sources, from ecological sources should be prioritized and supported by consumers, also governments, and we should motivate and encourage more farmers to participate in producing healthy, nutritious food and conserving the environment. Thank you so much, and I continue to listening to this interesting conversation. Thank you.
Janet, thanks very much for highlighting a lot of important points there, and primarily that nature actually knows how to heal itself if we could just get out of the way, and the importance of putting farmers really at the center of innovation. For illuminating how important adapting to scale to the ecological and economic and cultural conditions are. Our third speaker in this session is part of a mission to regenerate 100 million hectares of land. Welcome to Gus Tahar, who is the Chief Operations Officer of reNature. And unmute yourself.
There we go. Let me see if I can share my screen with you so that you can all take a look at what I prepared for you today. So indeed, thank you for introducing me, Jenny. My name is Gus Tahar, or Gus. That's usually easiest in international settings. I work for a still relatively small firm called reNature. We do work with some of the biggest names in the world when it comes to food production. So, for instance, Danone is one of the partners that we are very happy to be working together with. And I'm here today to basically share with you that sustainable is not enough. And I think this is something that we've all heard, the gargantuan challenges that we're facing here today. We have the protein transition that we need to organize. We have the energy transition that we need to organize. We're well on our way to fail basically any international agreement on sustainability that there is. And yet there's also hope, thankfully. But sustainable in itself is not enough. And this is a topic that I think might be a challenge to some of the paradigms out there. But I'll explain to you why I feel that sustainability is not enough. Regenerative is about going beyond sustainability. We have a current food production system that is set up to degenerate. It is extractive and it is polluting, and it is all of the things that my colleagues have already described to you. What we're working towards, or what we've been working towards in the past 10 years, is a net zero approach, sustainability. However, if we look at sustainability, in many cases, it's seen as kind of a static state. It's a land that is no longer getting any worse. But if we have been extracting from it from the past 10, 50, 100 years, then a net positive, or sorry, a net zero state is not enough. We need to start healing the land, and this is I like that from what I've heard before. We need to heal the land. We need to allow nature to heal itself, and so we need to move into a regenerative state. Now, what are we working towards? That's already a difficult part. That's already a challenge because we get stuck in the definitions. Regenerative is, in many cases, a collection of principles and activities. We have our own definition of reNature, but already that is part of the problem. We have our own definition, and so does everybody else. We focus on a number of core components of regenerative agriculture, which focuses on soil diversification, including the inclusion of livestock, economic viability and food security, something that we find very important as a part of regenerative agriculture. But this is not it. We're not looking to check the box in terms of activities and in terms of principles. We need to move towards an outcome-based approach. We need to start really looking at what is the impact that we're trying to achieve and how does regenerative agriculture contribute to that. So if we're looking at outcome-based, we are not just talking about carbon, even though that's a very popular topic. And it's an important estimation of how the below ground biomass looks. We need to look at water cycles, at biodiversity. We need to look at soil fertility, but also social components like resilience of communities, empowerment of disenfranchised groups, zero waste strategies. All of these can be outcomes that we aim to achieve using a regenerative agriculture approach. Now, we have set a very big goal for ourselves. We already had a big goal, but we actually made it 100-fold bigger because we feel that we need to be ambitious. As an organization, and mind you, we currently have 16 people working for us at the office in Amsterdam and a flexible shell of experts around the world. But we want to regenerate 100 million hectares of land and support 10 million farmers in their transition by 2030. So we have about 8 years to do this. We have set this goal for ourselves because we feel that 1% for the planet is not enough. So we want to do more. We want to do at least 2%. And ideally, every year from now on, we start setting a higher goal. We, of course, cannot do this ourselves. So we work globally and we work with everybody who's basically willing to work with us. So we work with industry, with government, with NGOs, in order to organize this global transition to a more sustainable and more regenerative food system. Because in the end, when we're talking about sustainable intensification, it's almost kind of a contradiction in terms. We need to do things differently. We don't need to do them more and then move towards net zero. We need to do them different and better, and we need to move towards a net positive. We do that worldwide. I'm myself a very strong believer in the fact that since we are in a capitalist system, a lot of the change that we want to see will come from the industry and will need to come from the industry. Consumers, of course, need to be educated and the demand needs to be created. But in the end, I think the industry is in the position of power to really move forward. We ourselves do this through a number of things, technical advisory, implementation, but in the end, what we want to achieve is to really regenerate entire value chains and create regenerative trading practices where regenerative is seen as the norm and no longer the exception or as a hobby. It's really an investment. It's a risk mitigation strategy. And of course, there's a whole ecosystem of impact measurement and funding to support this. As I mentioned, I think one of the key challenges that we have is really measuring and communicating the impact of regenerative agriculture. How is it better than what we're currently doing, and which are the challenges that we're trying to address together? Finally, and then I hope I'll stay within my 5 minutes, Jenny. You've asked me what are the barriers to scale, and this for me was an important one. I'm quite dynamic, so I used some of the Slido output already, made some screenshots, as you can see here. What does regenerative agriculture mean? Nobody in this chat mentioned that it is the future business model for farmers. Everybody talks about, it's a way to heal nature, to rejuvenate, we give back more than we take, we heal the land. It's all true. But what we also said is, what is the biggest barrier to scaling? There's no finance, there's no investment. And what I think is one of the key drivers of sustainability in general, but regenerative agriculture in specific, is that we need to start seeing farmers as entrepreneurs, and we need to develop a business case for regenerative agriculture. Currently, it's still a hobby seen by many. It's the new thing within sustainability. Let's do it. Let's get on the regenerative bandwagon. It doesn't really matter what we mean by it as long as we can regenerate. But that's not how it should be. Regenerative should really be the business case for the farmer that makes them future-proof, that makes them resilient. Knowing your farmer is then also an important part of this, because we don't want to get stuck in a neo-colonialistic approach where we in Europe or in North America decide this is what sustainability is, now you go and do it. We need to recognize that this farmer should be empowered and that she or he should receive the tools to be able to do this effectively. Knowing your farmer, knowing their context and their reality, thus requires you to know, as a company, your entire supply chain. Where does my food actually come from? Where does my fiber actually come from? And then when we start regenerating, we should recognize that regenerative is a dynamic state. It's not a check in the box. It's not something that we can do in a couple of years and then we're done and on to the next sustainability trend. It's continuous improvement and it's outcome focused. And I think therefore data and facts are really required to show that this is the right way to go, but those are lacking and we're very new at this. Everybody is, but also us as a company. Jenny, I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask if it's okay to stop you there, because we're really running short of time, and you've shared an enormously large vision with us, and I hope that you'll
That's fine.
join.
I have one slide and then I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah. So the only thing that I want to show is I don't want to just talk about barriers. I want to end on the opportunity. So for me, this is the important one. Why regenerative? I think it's holistic and it's a flexible approach. It speaks to people. It speaks to the new generation of farmers and consumers. And the world is moving away from the old ways. We're looking at true costs. We're looking at insetting into our supply chains. And these new polycrop systems of regenerative agriculture really unlock new partnerships by combining multiple supply chains. And I think that in that sense, this is really the way forward and the way for the new generation. So our window of opportunity to act is closing. My time is up as well, but let's do this together.
Chris, thank you very much for your contribution. And as you talk so strongly about farmers, I'm going to introduce a farmer who has been through this journey himself. Will Harris from White Oak Farms in the US is going to share his journey with us.
Good. Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate being here with you all today. Thank you for that opportunity. I hope that if I can make any contribution here, it will offer some little glimmer that these things that we are discussing can be done. Now, my farm is called White Oak Pastures. It's in the Gulf Plains, coastal plains of the United States. And it's been in my farm for currently 6 generations. I'm the 4th generation. My father and grandfather farmed the land in a manner that would have been considered highly regenerative. My father, post-World War II, moved the farm to an industrial, monocultural, commoditized, centralized cattle operation. I ran the farm that way for 20 years. I went to the University of Georgia, majored in animal science, returned and ran the farm using copious quantities of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, tillage, hormone implants, subtherapeutic antibiotics, etc. After 20 years of that model, I became disenchanted with the unintended consequences that was occurring on my land and on my animals. I started moving away from it. I've been moving away from it for 25 years, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the result. So the changes that I chose to make, very intentional changes, were to the land and the animals. And I simply moved away from the things I didn't like, and I was delighted with the outcome. With regard to the animals, today, instead of a monocultural confinement cattle operation, we pasture raise 5 red meat species: cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits, hand butcher them here on the farm. Pasture raise 5 poultry species: chickens, turkeys, geese, guineas, ducks, hand butcher them here on the farm. We raise pastured eggs, honey, certified organic vegetables, a number of other small ancillary businesses that create the organism that is White Oak Pastures. Very pleased with the animal welfare side of it. All of our animals are raised in a manner that allows them to express instinctive behavior. very intentional decisions were made by me with regard to the management of the land. Could talk about it a lot. If you go to our website, whiteoakpastures.com, you'll see a life cycle assessment that was done. Our land has moved from a 0.5% organic matter to 5% in 20 years. The changes that we made for the land and the animals, as I said, was very intentional. With regard to the community and environment, there was no intent on our part to improve it, but we've gone from having 4 minimum wage employees to having 180 employees that make well above the county average in one of the poorest counties in the United States of America. And as a result, our little town has gone from literally a ghost town to a little destination. It's still tiny, but it's a very, very pleasant place to live and raise children. Also unintentional was the intent to improve the environment. You can bet that 25 years ago, a 40-year-old Will Harris did not walk outside and say, I believe I can contribute to mitigating climate change. That did not happen. But in making the intentional changes that we did make, our farm is today carbon negative. Not 10 years from now or 15 years from now. Today, we sequester 3.5 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent for every pound of grass-fed beef we produce. So the hope that I'm conveying is that these changes that we have made here have worked beyond my expectation. And it was done by a C student from the College of Agriculture with bank debt, not a billionaire with a trust fund and a think tank, but it's highly replicatable. So again, thank you for allowing me to speak to you today.
Well, thank you. You may be a C student, but I think you get an A+ when it comes to regenerative agriculture. So thanks for joining us today. So last but not least, in this section, I'd like to invite our final speakers, who are a collaborative duet from an organisation I think we all know well. So welcome to Harriet Wilson, who's Agriculture and Sustainable Sourcing Head in UK and Ireland for McDonald's, and to Claire Hill of FAO Farms, who McDonald's have been partnering with on a grazing initiative that I think they're going to share with us.
Hi everyone, thank you very much Jenny for that introduction. So at McDonald's UK and Ireland, we are serving over 4 million customers every day, and that means that we're relying on 23,000 British and Irish farmers to supply us with the highest quality food. And this actually then makes us one of the largest buyers of British and Irish beef. So with that, we're striving to make sure that its production contributes to a more sustainable food system. And actually, we think that due to our extensive grazing-based systems in the UK and Ireland, we actually have one of the greatest opportunities to address climate change. So we're really pleased to be working with FAI Farms. We're funding this research in practice on the farm on adaptive multi-paddock grazing. And one of the aims of this project is to actually quantify the positive impacts of regenerative beef production, and then identify that best practice we can then share with our suppliers and farmers to actually then bring out about a greater impact. So we've actually also committed to have regenerative agriculture initiatives in each of our priority supply chains by 2025. And this is part of our new UK and Ireland strategy, which we're calling Plan for Change. So with that, I'm going to pass over to the video. We're going to play a short video to introduce the project, and then Claire's going to finish up. Thank you.
I'm Claire Hill, Regenerative Agriculture Director at FAI Farms. We've been working with McDonald's for 20 years on agricultural research projects. Our most recent project with McDonald's is looking at adaptive multi-paddock grazing in the UK, which is a regenerative agriculture practice. Regenerative agriculture is something that's coming to the mainstream. It's been practiced for a long time, but maybe only in small sections of agriculture. With the pressures that farmers are facing with profitability, flood, drought, farm resilience, farmer mental health, animal health challenges, regenerative agriculture looks like it could be a possible solution for some. McDonald's in the States are part of a large project looking at adaptive multi-paddock grazing on multiple farms, and we looked at that project, thought it was exciting and wondered if it could work in the UK for McDonald's UK and Ireland. So we're putting it in practice on a 1,500 acre farm over here, looking at whether we can get the benefits from a regenerative agriculture system that have been claimed, like healthier soil, better carbon lockdown, healthier animals, better daily live weight gain, more grass grown, lower input costs, overall happier and more profitable farmers. That's what we're looking at. The main practical changes that we've implemented are to focus a lot more on our grazing planning, which includes outwintering and bale grazing, and also focusing on rest periods rather than residuals of grass. We achieve that with cell grazing. We've mobbed our animals into larger groups and we're moving them on every 1 or 2 days, which means we're aiming for about a 6-month rest period on most of our grazing. In order to help more farmers with their own transition, the project is capturing over 60 different measures around soil health, animal health, farm profitability, environmental benefits, so that we can fully understand what an adaptive multi-paddock grazing regenerative system looks like in the UK to help other farmers in UK and Ireland with their transition.
Hi everyone, that was an intro to the project, and what I'm going to spend my 60 seconds doing now is just talking about what's next. Where are we going with it? And there's 2 big things that are coming out for us at the moment, or have come out even during the first year. And one is about the training and the sharing of the learning. Normally in a project you think you wait to get to the end of the project and then you start sharing the learnings, but it's so much bigger than that, and we're starting that now. We're rolling out a training for a farmer facing training, but also those working in the supply chain, in McDonald's UK and Ireland supply chain. And that has been really interesting. We never went into the project thinking that would be what we would need to do, but we so quickly realized that this is about so much more than just farm level, and that if everybody working from farm level up didn't understand about what regenerative agriculture or regeneration of our planet meant, it's not just about agriculture, then we would be kind of like bashing a closed door. So we've got 2 sets of training that Harriet is rolling out at the moment. You heard in the video that we're measuring over 60 different things through ethical, economic and environmental different measures, from number of days to slaughter, cow fertility, farm team morale, approach, thoughts, feelings towards the changes that we're making, because as we know, everybody talks about the mindset being the biggest challenge here. And finally, to really understand the land regeneration all the time. How do I know? Question, how do I know if I have a regenerative farm? Well, is your land regenerating? Oh, I don't know. Well, that's what we need to know. And so that's been the biggest thing, is what we've had to learn is to learn what to observe, to learn what feedback to look for. And I guess our main source of information has been through Savory trained professionals, and achieving the ecological outcome verification last year kind of showed us that what we were doing was good, and that we got that in our first year. But we've got all this great mass of information, and now we need to start to narrow it down, to start to understand what are the best proxy measures to help others in the scaling of regenerative agriculture. So that's what we're working on next.
Claire and Harriet, thank you. You hit your 5 minutes exactly. I'm deeply grateful to you. We are running short on time, and we have an enormous amount of interesting questions from everything on business models and how to support regenerative agriculture, and conversely, suggestions that we need to move away from animal protein to plant-based diet. So as we are desperately short of time here, I wonder if each of the panel could just give me a short answer on what they think is the most important action to start transforming the food system in a really quick soundbite. And I'm going to go in reverse order. So Harriet and Claire, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, no problem. I can kick off. I think the key thing is going to be speaking a common language, and actually then how we support farmers, because out there. Farmers, farmers on the ground ask me, their common question is, but what is it? What is regenerative?
Super. Thanks, Harriet. I think we've lost you. I'm going to go to Will. What's the most important thing, Will?
Industrial farming breaks the cycles of nature. The water cycle, mineral cycle, microbial cycle, energy cycle, on and on. Reinstating those cycles of nature is without a doubt the first step towards a regenerative ecosystem. And to answer the second part of your question, as a practitioner who has done this for 25 years, I can tell you that those cycles of nature cannot be reinstated cost effectively without animal input. Cannot be done.
Well, thank you for that. Gus, or Gus, I'm going to get it right soon.
That was surprisingly good, Jenny.
I'm getting better.
What I think needs to happen is that we need to believe, but we need to validate. I think regenerative agriculture really needs a proof of concept, and we need to find a way to not just agree on what we're trying to achieve, but to measure which of our approaches work best, including improving farmer livelihoods and creating a business case for the whole supply chain.
Awesome. Janet, I can't see you on my screen. Are you still with us? I think we might have lost Janet.
Yes, I'm still here. I'm still here, Jenny. Sorry, I'm experiencing some network connection problems.
Okay,
so sometimes I break off and sometimes I'm back.
Okay, not to worry. Do you have anything you'd like to share with us quickly about the one thing that you think is most important for transforming the food system, given we are in a complex system?
I beg your pardon, I didn't hear that.
I think we've lost Janet again. So, Jan, I'm going to go to you.
Yeah, well, not to let's say repeat what the previous speakers have said, but I think it's very important that we see why do we produce food in the first place. It's for consumers, and I think there's also a job, because that we should not only focus on how things are produced or how do we get it on the shelf. I think we have an important job to showcase that people need to think, including me, about a healthier diet. That's where it starts, and then indeed the full value chain back, as all the previous speakers have mentioned. So keep that in that full line in, let's say, in our thoughts and strategies.
Super, thank you so much to all of our second group of panelists. We have far more questions than we can go to, but our speakers will be joining us in the breakout group shortly. We're also super lucky to have João Campari, who's the global leader of food practice at WWF International and who's chair of Action Track 3, Boost Nature Positive Production at UN Food Systems Summit with us. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to ask João to share with us his feedback on how regenerative agriculture and agroecology came to the fore during the summit's recent discussions. So welcome, João.
Jenny, thank you, and delighted to be here, everybody. Good to see some familiar faces and meet some new ones. So let me start with a stark message. We are in a planetary emergency, and human activities are destabilizing, as we have heard, our climate and food systems and destroying natural ecosystems faster than they can recover. With this happening, we are actually undermining the planet's ability to support us, and we are also accelerating climate change. As we know, food systems are vital to our survival, but they are not on track if we are to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. In 2020, up to 111 million people went hungry, over 100 million more than the previous year. Food production systems use most of our land and withdraws most of our available fresh water, and is the largest driver of deforestation and biodiversity loss. In fact, wildlife species have decreased by 68% on average since 1970. We are now likely to reach 1.5 degrees of global warming within the next 2 decades, with food systems producing about 29% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And climate change decreases our food security. In a hotter and drier world, we are forecast to have lower yields with lower nutritional density. All else held constant, this means less food and of lower quality. For the benefit of nature, climate, and people, we must urgently transform our food systems and adopt nature-positive production at scale. By doing so, we cannot just minimize the negative impacts of food systems. We can unleash their potential to support a nature-positive, food-secure world with net zero emissions. We must meet the fundamental human right to healthy and nutritious food while operating within planetary boundaries. Regenerative agriculture and agroecology are key to addressing the triple challenge of food insecurity, climate change, and biodiversity loss. The UN Food Systems Summit provided real progress on this front. More than 150 countries made statements in support of food systems transformation, and over 100 have already mapped out national pathways. This is more robust framework for transformation that has ever before existed. A vibrant coalition of action on agroecology has emerged from the summit. We have seen strong leadership from countries, including France and Senegal, and stakeholders from across food systems collaborating to enhance and scale the existing principles and concrete solutions. That said, at the summit, many countries overlooked nature and climate in their statements, unfortunately. We need to see stronger leadership on these issues and for more countries to prioritize investment into regenerative farming and agroecology, laying out bold, ambitious, and urgent actions. We need to see national governments working with civil society more and more, and with youths and indigenous people, and for everyone to work across borders, because in the end, food systems crosses borders as do the landscapes and natural resources and services on which they depend. Without close collaboration across sectors, we can't realize the potential of regenerative farming and agroecology to help deliver development, climate, and nature goals simultaneously. There must be a shift in thinking to measure the true value of food and price it accordingly. Globally, food consumed has a market value of about $9 trillion per year. But external costs are estimated to be almost double that amount, close to $20 trillion per year. This means that food is roughly a third of the cost it would be if externalities were included in market prices of food. We also need to change incentives to drive us towards regenerative farming and agroecology. All forms of agri-food support systems, including subsidies, must be repurposed to financially reward farmers and fishers for maintaining and optimizing the services that their lands and waters can render to people and planet, without, of course, compromising livelihoods, especially of the small farmers and fishers, and the human right to safe, healthy, and nutritious food for all. That said, agroecology and regenerative agriculture are not limited to small-scale farming, which is generally the view. There is already evidence that it can be applied at scale and rival or surpass monoculture production in terms of yields and nutrient density, supporting nature and benefiting livelihoods of farmers and fishers, especially, again, the small ones. The solutions for nature positive, food secure, net zero emissions world already exist. We just need to be bold and more ambitious to finance and implement them at scale. It is essential that regenerative farming and agroecology are integrated into climate and nature agendas and are discussed as solutions in institutional spaces like the upcoming Climate COP in Glasgow. We must move away from siloed piecemeal actions and into deploying integrated strategies that resolve the triple challenge of food security, climate change, and the loss of nature. Failure to do so potentially means that we will be facing irreversible damage to nature, climate, and people. We have today less than 9 harvests left in the UN decade of action. This is just 9 more chances until 2030 to change how we produce and consume food. This will take energy and commitment from all of us. The time is now for ambition, boldness, and urgency. Let's seize this moment. Thank you very much, Jenny. Delighted to be here.
Rodale, thank you so much. So bold and ambitious, I think, is the cornerstone of what we've got to be. So everybody, now it's your turn to be bold and ambitious. In a moment, we'll open the breakout rooms, but first let me share a few details of what we're going to try to do together. We're going to explore 4 key questions that you will any second now see on the screen in front of you. They'll also appear in the chat box, but if you want to take a screen grab with you, please do. There'll be a facilitator in each group who'll help you keep time and move through the 4 questions over about 45 minutes. We won't be recording this part of the dialogue to encourage open and genuine conversation between you. So I know the facilitators would also deeply appreciate someone in each group volunteering to be a note taker, and they'll ask you when you arrive in the group. The speakers you've heard from will be allocated across the groups, those that can stay with us and join you in those discussions. And once we've deliberated on those questions, we'll come back into plenary where we'll gather your feedback via a series of Slido questions again. So there's no need to report back from the floor. So any second now, you find yourself automatically allocated into a breakout room, and I hope you all enjoy a very fruitful conversation together. And I know the panelists will be eager to hear the outcomes of your deliberations in about 45 minutes time. And thank you once again to all of our panelists, because I know some of you have to leave us now. Have a great discussion, and we will see you back here in 45 minutes. Wonderful. I think we are now all back. I hope you've had some brilliant discussions. I hopped into a few and they seem to be going well, and that you've come up with many and diverse perspectives on what needs to happen. So now it's time for us to gather your feedback in what we think might be quite a fast and furious format. So if you've all got your Slido up to hand again, and the code is CIWF if you need it. And if everybody is ready, we're going to share what we think live in the Slido app. So here's the first question for you. So what are the top 3 actions that should be taken, and by which stakeholder, to enable regenerative agriculture to become a key pillar of a sustainable food system? What were the 3 things that your group came up with? What would you, I'll give you a minute to start typing things in, and then I think they'll appear on our screen. I'm hoping they'll appear on our screen. Everybody is back in the Slido app. Okay, here we go. Knowledge exchange and peer-to-peer learning. Peer-to-peer learning, is that between farmers? I'm guessing. Incentives should be changed by the politicians. Yeah, definitely. I think we need new policies and new incentives. Provide the knowledge, and so financial support again, including farmers, making sure farmers are at the centre, empowering farmers. I think, we have deep recognition in this group of the importance of starting from farmers. Transparency over full supply chain. Carbon markets to be part of the solution. That's an interesting one. Educating children and consumers. Yep, definitely we need, I think that came up a lot, to engage consumers more in creating the demand for agroecologically produced food. Adapt solutions to local context, hugely important. Context is king. Once upon a time, I think people used to say culture is king, but I think context in complex systems is enormously important. Better monetary accounting for the benefits of regenerative agriculture, better monitoring and better accounting for the benefits. I think that would go a long way to making the business case that we talked about earlier. Global metric on carbon measurement, that's an interesting one. Fantastic. It seems as if you've had some really super discussions. Oh, this is a big one. Redirect agricultural subsidies, governments, yep. Support transitional finance with longer time tenor. Okay, interesting. Public Development Bank, insurance and financial institutions, I think, have a huge role to play here. Develop support services, knowledge, technical support that's created by farmers. Trade tariffs, that's interesting. That's the first time that's come up in the conversation. And of course, trade tariffs are globally enormously impactful. You know, I think the WTO, you know, has a big role to play here. Okay, super. Some excellent points that we're making here. Shift criteria in investment groups and pensions. Yeah, I think that would be helpful. There's a lot of debate about you know, what pension funds should be doing and how they should be investing in regenerative economies rather than degenerative ones. Okay, excellent. Let's go to question 2. What's the most memorable thing you've heard someone say in the last hour? A polite, memorable thing I'm hoping for here, an informative, memorable thing. Let's see what you've got to say. Farmers and natural asset managers, yeah. That's, yeah, a new narrative of how we think about farmers. I think it might have been Hus that talked about farmers being seen as entrepreneurs. Replicable, not scalable. Yeah, that's a very interesting concept. I think we get obsessed with the idea of scale, and scale is almost a neoclassical economic strategy, which I haven't got time to go into here. What else have we got? What else has been memorable for you? Changing business models. I think that's really important. Yeah, the end goal is truly elusive. It does keep moving. We are operating in complex times, and it's more about charting a course to an imagined destination, I think. And we know when we're charting a course, certainly by the stars, it requires a lot of wiggle room. Empowering farmers in a globally relevant context, not a neo-colonial framework. Super. Gonna bookmark that one. Need for landscape scale and territorial approaches. Very interesting. I think I was speaking with somebody from an organization called Regen Network a few weeks ago, and talked about what the opportunity would be if the fences across large landscapes could come down, and the benefits of shifting certainly livestock over large systems could be, over large landscapes could be transformative. Change policy and financial systems, otherwise farmers are doing this in spite of the system rather than because of it. Excellent. Okay, we have one final question for you. And then I'm going to invite Philip back to close this really interesting session. So what's integrated landscape management? Super. Not getting worse is not enough. Definitely true. Definitely true. Okay, super. Let's have our last question. Can we go to the last question? Okay. Doesn't seem as if we can manage to get there. Well, listen, I am super grateful to have spent the last 2.5 hours with you. I think we have heard an enormous amount of really valuable information, but we are coming towards the close of this dialogue. I hope that you feel we have unearthed some of the key opportunities and issues that affect the ability to develop agroecological and regenerative food systems worldwide. We'll be collating all of the feedback that you have provided, not just via Slido, but through the group facilitators and note takers, and making sure that we The diversity, the extreme diversity of views here are represented in the report that we'll put into the UN food systems process. So finally, I'd like to hand back to Philip to close the session. So from me, thank you to all of you who've participated, and thank you to all of our speakers who joined us today. It's been enormously informative and enjoyable. Philip, over to you.
Jenny, thank you so much for curating a fascinating discussion this afternoon with so many talented individuals with real insight. Thank you so much for sharing your views on how we are going to save the planet for the benefit of animals and people to come. Jenny, participants, we heard so much about what it's going to take if we are going to shift food systems as we need to in a very short space of time. We heard from Joao Campari from WWF telling us that we've got 9 harvests left until the Sustainable Development Goals are either achieved or not, whether we've got a sustainable food system or not, whether we've got a future or not. What happens in these next 9 years, these next 9 harvests will count for the next 1,000 years. We talked at the beginning about how regenerative agriculture is seen as a healing process, healing our relationship with nature, how a lack of systems thinking has been holding us back from grasping the nettle on this. And we've referenced the UN Food Systems Summit. Of course, this event has been inspired by that UN Food Systems Summit, and how that summit has established an unprecedented level of engagement and a framework for action on food. Bold, ambitious, urgent action, which is needed. I think one of the things which has been talked about in the chat, I think quite rightly, is that scaling up regenerative agriculture to encompass producing as much meat as we produce at the moment would bust planetary boundaries, that increasing regenerative agriculture and regenerative farming is an absolute must. So is resizing the livestock industry globally, moving away from factory farming, moving into regenerative farming, and reducing the amount of meat and other animal sourced foods that we produce, probably by 1/2 to 2/3, depending on the source, if we're to keep within planetary boundaries. Nicoletta Battini talked about the role of economic policy in locking us in to intensive agriculture, and therefore pointing a light very firmly to the need for policies, subsidies and financial incentives to be a key driver to this new future. We heard from Jeff Moyer of the Rodale Institute that regenerative is not backward facing, it is far from it, forward facing. And that we need to embrace technology to advance the scale of the uptake. Siham from UNEP talked about agroecology being nature positive production, restoring rather than further damaging. So how do we scale this up, this restoring rather than damaging? Well, connecting with big players and inspiring big players has got to be part of the puzzle. And we heard from Xian from Danone, who is working with 400,000 farmers worldwide. And he was sharing how farmers can learn from each other and share best practices. So engaging as a key stakeholder group, those producers worldwide. And on that similar note, we heard from Janet Marrow regarding her work with 20,000 farmers in Tanzania, regenerating the land by using intercropping and green manures in a system that nourishes itself. Gus from reNature talked about sustainability and how it's not enough, that regenerative is going beyond sustainability, something I wholeheartedly agree with. After all, if sustainability is sustaining a depleted resource, then it still leaves you with a depleted resource we need to put back, and that is what regenerative agroecological production is all about. And we heard from an inspiring practitioner about how this is being done, Will Harris at Oaks Pastures, and I can tell you his farm is an inspiration, is an insight, is a beauty to behold. His farm shows that regenerative solution is not only possible, but is happening today. And all of that fashioned by a former factory farmer, a practicing farmer who is not afraid to get his hands dirty to save the planet. We heard from Harriet Wilson and Claire Hill from McDonald's and FAI about their adaptive multi-paddock grazing, again, gleaning wonderful insights about how to bring back soil health, wriggling worms, keeping cows more naturally, and how to spread the word through their supply chain, how to pull it through by getting Goliaths, like some of the big companies, on board. And finally, again, we heard from Joao Campari of WWF International, talking about food systems being vital to our survival. But they're not on track. We are well off track in achieving those SDGs. So I think, Jenny, I think colleagues around the world, we've had a fantastic discussion about how to save the planet for people and animals alike, whether those animals be wild or domesticated. And we've got some key insights to take forward to achieve those bold, ambitious goals. Now let's go forward together and inspire action, because action today will count for 1,000 years. Thank you so much, and look forward to being together again sometime very, very soon. The planet depends on us. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.